had I had this is very silly. I had AI. Here, let me share my screen up. Because you're here early. This is the stupidest thing ever.
You're always
Um, so I use GPT-3 to have it generate a script about an argument about functional programming between a husband and wife. And then I used this other software called Descript, with which I have already synthesized, trained, I guess, a neural net or something on my voice and Olive's voice. And so it's going to now perform the argument that the other AI wrote. So an AI performance, it's not that great, but here we go. Let's make it too big. All right.
You're always talking about how great functional programming is, but I just don't see the appeal.
Functional programming is awesome. It makes code so much simpler and easier to understand.
I don't see how that's possible. It just seems like a lot of unnecessary ceremony to me.
Trust me, it's worth it. Once you get used to functional programming, you'll never want to go back to the old way of doing things.
I'm not sure I believe that, but I'm willing to give it a try. I just don't want to get too bogged down in all the details.
Don't worry, you don't need to understand all the details to start using functional programming. Just take it one step at a time and you'll be surprised at how easy it is.
How sensible. How
I know. I love how it's an argument, but they have it's not just they're yelling at each other. They have a discussion and they come together in a very positive way. In fact, the way we're kind of trying to come together right now.
it perfectly, yes, encapsulates our arguments. But yes, well, yeah, I'd like to introduce here Olive, who, well, you take it away, Olive. Who are you?
My name is Olive. Some of you may know that I am married to Kit. A couple of years ago, I started studying programming, and about a year and a half ago, I started studying Scala. And I recently finished a 3-month internship with Diverge, during which I made the app that I'm going to present today, which is Zio Pet Clinic.
Yay, that's incredibly yes, the AI voice kind of made her sound a little more robotic. It does that. It also, to train it, you have to read basically a Planet Earth script, which makes you speak in a very sort of strange way that might not be natural. But anyway.
I don't think anybody's concerned that my voice doesn't sound like the
robot. Clearly tough. Yeah, we need to work on that training for the neural net. But hey, everybody. So the actual welcome again. We're going to talk about basically Zio Pet Clinic. Pet Clinic is this application that I don't know why it's the canonical example app in a certain part of the ecosystem, but there's a play version of a pet clinic. There is a Spring Pet Clinic. Everyone has a pet clinic. And so we thought, let's make the Zio Pet Clinic to show how things can look like using the Zio ecosystem, and also put in some best practices in there. Everyone loves best practices. So I think all of you are going to share your screen, and we're still going to talk about it and go through it. I think we're joined in as well. Yeah, take it away.
Great. So this is our Pet Clinic app. We have the ability to do a couple things within this.
You know what? Because we're in the same room, I just realized the Zoom will show my face just sort of dumbly staring at the screen on the recording. So no. So I'm gonna mute, and then we'll switch over to give you the Zoom control or the volume.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Okay. A little
bit.
Okay. So we are in the owners tab of our application. We have a pre-loaded list of owners, just so you can kind of explore data on your own. They have pets and appointments and all kinds of good things, but we're going to start by adding our own owner. And I'm going to add myself. I hear there are some requests to, I guess, see Crumb and Worm's name just on a web page. So we're going to do that. So I'm Olive at olive.dev. I'm going to put in my phone number here.
She actually does own olive.dev.
That's true.
Very good.
There
you go.
So,
He's a real developer.
A few $100,000.
And we're going to save that. And you can see that I have now been added to our list of owners. I can go into my profile and add a pet. We're going to add Crumb because she was born first. She was born in 2019.
0202.
Oh no. There we go. Save, yay, there's Crum. And now we can add a visit for her as well from her profile, and she's going to have her ears checked. And we're gonna see that a vet is assigned to her visit as well. We can add a second pet, which is Worm. She's also a feline. She was born November 19th, 2020. Save, yay. So we have a completed profile. We can also go in and delete our owners, modify, I'm gone, modify any existing owners. I think you get the idea. We also have a preloaded list of veterinarians that users cannot at this point interact with. It's just for assignment to appointments. But
I'm glad we have such full set of services we can offer.
yeah.
Small and large animal medicine.
Neurology, that's very important. Yeah.
I like, yeah, Dr. Totoro's there. There's
Large animal internal medicine.
also, we should probably mention that it's also on the web deployed.
Correct.
If you want to try to break it. It is on a free Heroku tier.
Yes,
So
that is right. So from the GitHub page, there's instructions for running the application. And as Kit mentioned, you can run it from,
well, no,
or
we're
you
doing
can
localhost
use-
now, but we have it deployed as well. Let me
right,
get
yeah,
that.
that's where I just opened it in Heroku here. I'm running
Oh.
it locally primarily because I found a little bug before we started, so I went ahead and fixed that.
Hey.
So why don't we take a look at some of the code? Does that sound good?
Let's do it.
Right.
So,
I'm also sharing in the Discord the various
The
links to the
Heroku.
repo and to the Zia Pet Clinic
Beautiful.
.surge.sh.
So our project is organized by backend, front end, and shared files. I'm just gonna jump right into the backend. I already have this open, but I'm gonna open up this file chain there. So main is what I've got open here, and this is the entry point for our application. We basically provide all of our required layers to our run function, and this starts up our server and allows us to run our application. Should we?
Oh yeah, want to look at the remain stuff.
Well, do you want to do the graph first?
Let's look at the graph. Sure, that'll
Okay.
give sort of a sense of it. So on that line on 43, maybe just uncomment out the
Yep.
debug. So what we've taken a look at this a little bit before, but now we have such a large application. If we were to run this or compile this, it would maybe just open the terminal and we could show that giant. It's going to
Yes.
spit out a huge URL because it's the base URL encoded version of sort of our some JSON that represents our layer. So it's a bit annoying that IntelliJ stops being able to parse it after like 200 characters. But if you do copy paste that into the browser, you will see this. And this basically represents the all the dependencies that we're about to take a look at. So maybe if you want to kind of just walk through the general architecture.
Sure, yeah. So our clinic server depends on all of our routes, and our routes in turn depend on our services, which all require the data source layer from our Quill context. And so we can go ahead and start looking at routes.
Yeah.
And then move, well, I guess we'll start with clinic server actually.
yeah, and just maybe before we can go from that, like I think this is a really nice example of what a useful feature this can be, because I think so far when we kind of demoed it, we're just like, oh, isn't that like pretty? It's a cool thing, but like this is actually something that like if you're presenting it to someone, this is ready made for you, right? You just click the link, and this is not a bad overview of what this thing is. And if you were like at an actual company, you could like take this and you could like use it in like an architecture discussion, or you could copy and paste it into an architecture diagram somewhere. So I think it's actually a pretty cool thing beyond just like, oh, it's a fun little demo.
Yeah. I think it's great too. I mean, coming from my position of being new to learning programming, and then, Scala as well, being able to see like a visual representation of how these things connect. Because, as you're writing an application, it starts to feel like in some ways you're repeating information, right? You've got like a route and a service, and it's like a lot of the same information feels like it's being passed around, but to understand like what the hierarchy is in terms of like requirements, it's very useful visually.
Yay.
I interrupted you. Were you going to say
No, I was just saying yay.
something? Okay, so I will.
and maybe just one more thing to point out here, if you want to scroll up for a second.
Yeah,
Sorry, so maybe down a little bit, just where you have your run method.
sure.
So one thing that jumps out from this is you're using the pattern where your main application logic is itself a layer. So like everything is a layer here. There's nothing in the run method except a layer. And so you're using the Zio.service with Zio to just start it. And then everything becomes a layer, which I think is kind of where like best practice idiomatic kind of architecture is going. And one implication of that is you never need the accessors because all of your logic is in one of these layers where you're kind of getting things as part of your constructor argument. So I think we'll see that, but I just wanted to kind of highlight that here because I was actually doing the same thing when I was updating Xionomicon for Zio 2, and I was doing the same thing.
Yes.
Which is good to mention that I think maybe most people have been notified if you have Xionomicon, but I got that email. So that's pretty cool. I know people have been asking you for a long time. And now it's
and there's definitely more stuff to be updated, but I did the stuff on scopes and the chapter on layers, which I think are the two areas where you had the most changes in Zio 2.
Yeah.
Cool. Yes, the fractal service pattern is how this was described to me. Right.
Let's comment out the debug as well.
Great.
Sweet.
Lovely. So we will go into our clinic server, and there's quite a bit of documentation in these files, and I added the documentation at a level that will hopefully be helpful to somebody who is maybe new to programming or new to Zio.
Sorry, one question. We got a question in the Discord, which is what is actually the IntelliJ theme you and your wife use? And actually, it's a bit of a point of contention between us. We use different themes.
I use Material Dark.
Yeah. So she uses the darker theme, and I just use Atom 1 dark. So yeah, it's a bit of a touchy subject there, Naveed. I mean,
maybe while we're going, you can generate another AI argument about those two themes.
So in Clinic Server, this is a service that houses all of the details for how to set up our Zio HTTP server. We, within this, compose all of the routes together that are required to start an HTTP app. We have some logging middleware here that enables us to log any errors that our app might run into. And we, in order to maintain data integrity within the database, we are resetting our data every 15 minutes. Just because in the deployed version in Heroku, for instance, people are able to manipulate data, and we want to make sure that stays clean and nice and happy.
Or at least any horrible things go away after 15 minutes.
Right. And then in the companion object, we're defining the layer that's going to be used to create the server. And we follow this pattern, as Adam said, we follow this pattern of defining these layers or deriving these layers basically in all of our files, and they're then composed together at the end of the world to run our application. So we can take a look at what a route looks like, and then maybe jump in, like kind of take a vertical slice of the application. We'll look at like a route and a service. And then, I don't know, after that. So owner routes is a service that provides the routes for our owner service API that serve the owner's endpoint. So we have a way to
Just maybe pinch it up a little bit.
Sorry. We have a way to get all of our owners from a database, to find owners by their ID, to create a new owner, to update an owner, and to delete an owner. And again, in the companion object, we're creating that layer that we're going to use to provide the routes for our owner service API.
Yeah. And the other thing that's striking me here is, both this file and the previous one you showed us are actually pretty simple. I think each of them is like less than 100 lines of code. And I don't think that's actually because your application is so simple, but it's because of using this service pattern, because each of these layers is just implemented in terms of the lower level layers. And so like what you have to keep in your head in each layer is like actually pretty simple, because you just get to use everything that's in the lower level layers.
Sure.
yes, to expand on that just a little bit. If we can, yeah, maybe go back to the maybe clinic server start method or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I guess this is not necessarily encapsulated in the layer. One thing we potentially could do is move the start logic into the creation of the layer itself and then just sort of start at the layer. Maybe that's a pattern worth exploring.
Mhm.
But the thing that I
Yeah.
found nice about this is, I mean, you can have this case class pattern or whatever in other code that's not Zio. But what ends up happening, and we kind of talked about this a little bit in the past, is that you have often in a different file, often in like the main file, a huge block of code that actually instantiates all these things and passes them to the constructor. Like if you use constructor style dependency injection, which certain people advocate for, I find that code creates this sort of high churn, single high churn location, single high churn file where you're just orchestrating everything. And it gets really messy really quickly. With this, the construction logic can be co-located in basically in the companion object. Like that's one of the beautiful things about Scala. If you like, I've tried to, sometimes I have to operate with Java libraries, and you have to basically, oh yeah, just some comments. You have to, no, it's okay. I do the same thing all the time, and then I'm like, wait, I'm like,
I just wanted to keep up with the comments. and I was thinking,
no, it's my own. Just want to make sure you were aware of that.
Yes.
It's totally fine. But yeah, in Java, it's so hard. I know I need to create like a connection pool or something, but how do I do it? There's no companion object. Do I do new connection pool? Is there some static public method, or is there a factory pattern? Is there a builder that I have to look for? And it's just like this horrible exercise. In Scala, you have this companion object where you house all the constructors. And a Z layer is sort of this glorified constructor, sort of an n-ary constructor where you can possibly construct more than one value. And being able to co-locate that is just really nice for app organization, I find. Like you just look at one file and it's local reasoning. It's the local reasoning of functional programming. You heard Olive in our AI argument at the beginning. Like it's exactly that sort of simplicity that we're struggling for. Okay. By the way, important question for you, Olive. Can I borrow some of your iced coffee that I see sitting to your right?
yeah, sure.
That's so generous of you.
So we'll continue on looking at our owner service. And this file basically just manages all of the CRUD operations for our owner type. And this is what's responsible for persisting and modifying our data. And you'll note this accessible annotation here. So I think, Adam, you mentioned accessors being more or less non-existent. We, however, do need them to run our test file. So I'm using macros to generate those, which is what this annotation indicates.
Maybe we should take a look at the test maybe after.
Yeah. So again, obviously it's very similarly structured to our routes in that we have, create, delete, get all, and update methods. And we've defined these, for all of our types. So, and they're basically all the same. So we probably don't need to look at each and every one of them. But what was one that stood out actually? There was maybe one visit service, maybe not. Oh, I want to look at the live implementations. That's what this was.
You want to look at it for owner service?
For owner service, yes. So then in this file, we house the live implementations
Takes a while
of
to
our
get used to the
service,
zooming.
yes, to the zooming, especially my screen is so small, it doesn't feel like it would be something I would need to do. This uses a data source currently, but I understand that there are some changes maybe being made within Quill. So how our data sources passed around might change. Is that correct? Do you have some more concrete information on what that would look like?
Yes. So the data source, which is essentially a Hikari connection pool, is currently, whenever you call run, which is imported from Quill context, that returns a Zio effect that has an environmental dependency on a connection pool, which makes sense because Quill was developed before Zio existed.
Sure.
But now Alex figured out a way basically to, instead of depending on a global Quill context, you pass Quill context around as a service. So if you scroll up a little bit, where we currently have data source, you would here have Quill context, and you would be able to call run directly on that context, and it would return you an effect that did not have any environmental dependencies, which is sort of the our purported service pattern is that the traits that you expose should not have any environmental dependencies, and instead should use this fractal service architecture. That's nice because it's repeatable and it's the same thing if you zoom in or out, right? Fractal. And so basically what we're gonna be able to do is soon enough delete this ugly part that has to exist on every time we call run, and this will just say CTX up here, CTX, and we'll call CTX.run or import CTX or something like that, and then just call run, and yeah, it'll work because it'll have the data source internally provided with a layer at the top of your application. So instead of data source layer, you'll say Quill context
Correct.
layers.
And we won't any longer have to import Quill context here.
We
Or we might
might,
still.
but it will be importing the value. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, it's going to become more idiomatic with the rest of our stuff, which is nice because Quill is amazing and I like using it a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's Quill. It's pretty cool.
All right, well, I mean, shared between the front end and back end is really the models that describe our data. I don't know if that's very interesting for anybody to see. There is some interesting elements in the front end, but admittedly, Kit helped me quite a bit with learning how to use Laminar to do a lot of that stuff. So if you guys have questions about that, we could probably work to both answer those together. But we can take a look really quickly at what, how our data is modeled. We have, for example, an owner, which has, an ID, a first name, last name, address, phone, and email address. And we have a make method, which allows us to create an owner. And we've removed the requirement for an owner ID to be supplied at a higher level by generating that here. And then we are deriving a JSON codec so that our owner can be serialized and deserialized into JSON.
And the cool thing, and we haven't talked about full stack apps in Scala in a while, but the very cool thing is that because we're using Scala.js in the front end, these JSON codecs and this data model itself is shared on both the front and back end. So we just save a lot of potential opportunity for error message, for error message. That sounded very strange. The error message for errors and transpositioning, my brain, what happened? I drank the coffee. In fact, I drank all of your coffee.
You really
I'm
did.
so sorry. I didn't notice that it happened. But yeah, it basically, I gave a talk about this. I deferred a past version of myself that could actually speak English when I gave a talk called Stockholm Syndrome Escape Velocity about full stack apps and in Scala and the benefits of being able to share all that derived stuff across both of them. But it's definitely saves a lot of work and made this process a lot simpler.
I mean, that's most of the app. Like I said, a lot of these files, are pretty repetitious across the different types of owners, pet, visit, and vet routes and services. But do people have questions? Do you want to know any more about?
Well, one thing we could probably do is just
Well, I
take a look at the testing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Testing.
Yeah, I think testing could be good. And then like I saw you've done some stuff with like metrics and maybe a little bit on like how we set up some of those like metrics and logging and some of those overall functionality, I think would be great.
Sure. Yeah. So we can go ahead and take a look at our owner service spec. So this test suite basically allows us to test all of the methods within our owner service. And we're using test containers for Zio here, as well as I mentioned, generating accessors using macros. So we're able to run these tests without writing those in this file or writing them in our service files.
Yeah, so that would be, I guess, like here, this is a good case to use accessors for now. Maybe we can come up with a better pattern, but it is kind of nice just to be able to not have to, do Zio.service and grab an owner service, and you could just sort of call these methods and then provide your implementation later on. Kind of is nice in the test case. What else should we explore? Can you run this actually?
Yep.
Oh, we might need Docker open for the test containers. I'm not sure if you have Docker run.
I do not, but I can do that now.
Okay, that'll take a moment. Yeah, scroll down to the bottom real quick. So yeah, basically, we already did a session, luckily, so some of this should be familiar. And it even involves Harry Potter or Harry Zotter or something when we did our example with Scott. Cool. That seems like it's starting up. And so basically we're using Zio test containers to not hit our local database and destroy all of our, our hard-earned developer dev mode data, and instead migrate a test container, containerized Postgres instance and hit that, and make all these queries against that. And we share that test container across all the tests. And yeah, I think we're migrating. I'll have added this migrate once command to Zio test containers. So basically it's only going to migrate around, it's kind of like provide shared in terms of an aspect. It's going to migrate at the beginning of this whole spec and keep that migration. So it doesn't run the migration once per
test.
Yeah, which is what it was doing previously. And you can just, in this case, we're careful that our tests are, because it's one test file and it's not that big, we can make sure that there's no inter-test dependencies. Cool. But want to run that and just see it go. Hopefully it's connected. We'll see. Run spec. And that's the beautiful output of, because we have log4j set up. It's so noisy. Okay, wow, there you go. Green pluses. What more could you want? But that is actually hitting the test container and making real Postgres queries against a real database. You can't beat that. And it happens pretty quickly. And yeah, you can run as many times as you want, and you're not going to clobber old data. But yeah, it's pretty clean as far as the test goes. A really nice experience. Yeah. So what else did you want to talk about? I think you said something else after test.
Logging and
logging.
metrics.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I wonder, well, Scott asked a question before, so I know he's here. So he would be disappointed, I feel like, if we did not.
Ooh, okay. And we also have some other questions over the
Yeah,
Zoom.
at the front end, yeah.
I'll get to.
Okay.
Cool. Well, so let's go to back to the main file. So we did add, in full honesty, the testing was added sort of towards the end, or sorry, not the testing, the logging and the metrics. I think we're going to have to maybe return to metrics when we do our session with Andreas, because while we to connect, we just couldn't figure out the like the New Relic connection. I've never used New Relic. We've never used New Relic before. Obviously, Olive hasn't used New Relic in the past. That's not like the first thing you do when you learn how to program. And so it's
everything seemed connected, but we just weren't seeing anything populating in New Relic.
Yeah, we probably need an expert, like some of our,
well, maybe next week, Andreas.
Exactly. Anyway, there are some other questions that maybe we could take a look at, and we can try to, Let me see. There was one on Zoom. Let me go to that first.
From Eli, I think.
Yep, from Eli.
Yeah,
How do you see the full stack developer experience for Scala changing over the next 6 to 12 months, particularly with regards to getting started? I'm curious if there are any initiatives to lower the barrier to entry. That's a great question.
Yes.
And I guess, and definitely for, I think, getting started with Zio and bringing Zio to more developers and newer people, and maybe one day making Scala a more accessible first language would be amazing as well. I think, you might be talking about that at some point in the future. But in terms of like full stack, including the front end, that is a little painful at the moment. Scala.js, just getting Scala.js to run and getting like a multi-project SBT build file set up is just a whole bunch of boilerplate. There is no create React app for a sort of a full stack. There is no Next.js. Like the JavaScript ecosystem just has such a stranglehold on these full stack apps because there's so much tooling investment in there, despite the fact that, the language, I would say, isn't as wonderful or beautiful as Scala. And I think the potential is lower. It has such an advantage due to the tooling investment. And I'm trying to, I'm passionate about that. I like building apps. I like building full stack apps. I like using Scala to do that. I like deriving what needs to be derived. I like deriving anything that I don't need to think about. So I've been working on stuff in that regard, sort of in the background. I've made that Scala School website using full stack Scala to sort of force, to dog food our ecosystem a little bit and to be a forcing function on just making certain pain points less painful. And so I'm going to hope to expose some of that stuff into open source and bring it back into open source soon enough. But yeah, just thinking about all the pains of building a full stack app. The first step is to feel them. So I've just been trying to build as much as I can. Just like creating new migrations, updating the database, deploying to Heroku, creating the app in the first place. I think the problem is people create these apps in Scala and they do it once, and then they use that same app for years and years and years. You have to sort of experience the pain of creation over and over again before you're like, I gotta make this better. So I think just building a lot of stuff and getting more people building full stack apps will force everyone to try to improve it. So I've been trying to do that, at least to myself, exposing myself to that laborious process, and then trying to see if I can create tools that do it more efficiently. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Hopefully it gets better. I plan to work on that. I think, Zio, now that Zio 2 is out, we're going to focus more on at least the application level experience on the back end. I probably have more of an interest in the front end than maybe some other people, but like I'm gonna try to push that forward too and have a unified, make sure that's is a good experience as well. But having better support at Zio HTTP and Quill, and like what we mentioned, cleaning up some of these like little pain points, just making everything really shiny on the back end is going to make it super compelling, I think, as a back end resource. One thing about functional programming is so many of these other languages need frameworks. They need frameworks that do everything for you. And the second you go off the rails, I guess to reference Rails, it becomes really painful to customize anything. And you sort of are just like, the second you go off the happy path, you are in the jungle. They pave like a golden ramp through really dangerous jungle. With functional programming, things decompose. So in a good way, decomposition's good. Once you go off the happy path, you are on a slightly less happy path. You are on 2 pretty good paths, and then you're on 4 awesome paths, and then like 6 decent paths. Like it doesn't do everything for you, but you break it down like Legos into something else that you understand. So it's this fractal idea again. So yeah, hopefully things get good. Okay, ramble over. What other questions are there?
So I think we have one question about a particular file in here, the server utils.scala.
Gotcha.
So maybe we can look at that.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah,
someone
okay.
was kind of saying, I guess, is there a way to clean this up a little bit, or do we really need this? Like, what's this doing for us?
Sure. So this houses helper functions that we're using to parse various elements of the API, including like request bodies. So it basically allows us to like explicitly define what we're parsing so that we can more accurately like diagnose errors and handle them. So parse body, for example, parses a request using a JSON decoder type class for the A type. And that's to decode an A from the request string body. So in the case of a failure, we're returning a custom error type that we've created for app error. And that's essentially what's in this file. There isn't really a lot. I don't know if like maybe with a more complex application, this would be larger and maybe handle more types. But for us, it's just about like parsing IDs basically and JSON bodies.
Yeah, it's definitely good. Kina, the
Yeah.
the utils file is generally sort of like, where you hide the scar or something of your code base. Luckily, this one hopefully is pretty, I'll have commented in every file, so I don't think anything's too ugly. And this one, it's a little bit of repetition, and we kind of talked about,
Yes.
should we abstract over this? And it's like, well, no, because it's done. Who cares? Like what we would just be, this is fine. We're not going to be adding too many more ID types to this application currently. So I'd say, but to make it more elegant, maybe we can make a type class for like ID parsable thing and then have a constraint on that. So it's more generic, but it's done for things. Why not? For parse body, it was easier because we already have a type class for a JSON decoder, and we were doing the same thing. In terms of like, can this be pulled out into Zio HTTP or something? I think so. For instance, currently, in order to parse JSON, you have to first extract. We'll do what we're doing here: extract the body as a string. That could fail. So you maybe want to map the error type, and then you have to use Zio JSON to parse that again, and so on and so forth, and use Zio.from to convert the either that returns into a Zio effect. And so there's a bit of boilerplate there. And, it's Zio HTTP and it's Zio JSON. So why not, potentially combine those two, or at least have like an additional package. And that is one of the things that I was exploring with that Zio API work I've been doing, which is kind of in progress, though I've been distracted by other things. But I definitely want to get back to that soon. And hopefully that could sort of be something that does automatically. I mean, that's kind of the idea, is that it decodes your type automatically using Zio schema and Zio JSON behind the scenes. So good question. Any other questions?
Yeah, I guess the other thing we maybe could do here is you could imagine some of these methods living in the companion object in those data types. I mean, maybe if you're kind of just getting a bigger app and you don't want this file to explode, that's another way you could kind of do a similar thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, that's okay. My old reflexes. Am I muted?
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay, cool. My reflexes of muting and unmuting myself and my computer do not hold in this scenario. One thing about it's something I think about a lot, because I used to be driven, and I still am, there's a sense of me which is repetition, make it dry this out. No thanks.
Is it worth it? Yeah.
But then, I'm sort of growing to be more comfortable with repetition. And I think repetition that's co-located like this is probably better than repetition that's split up amongst files. Like if these were on the companion object, it does feel nice, but then you wouldn't see this duplication here. And as this grew, you wouldn't see the fact that these are all similar. And so you might change the implementation and just say visit ID, but not in pet ID, because you wouldn't know. So I think there's a benefit of co-location. And as long as you're purposefully letting some duplication hang around, I think that's okay. It's okay to wait.
That's very fair.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think this project will maybe be, edited over time. I think that for me in writing it, it was helpful to maybe be a little bit verbose if it meant that it was more descriptive to me. So there are, some parts that are rather repetitious, but
that's another good thing to realize when you're coding. You can think something into one line, come up with a crazy term for it, but then you're going to look back at it in 5 months and it's terser. Concision is not clarity. And sometimes having multiple lines or having longer variable names is good if that means you're going to understand what that means, instead of having to reverse engineer some really clever encoding that you did to make your code shorter. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think to the earlier question, I think just having this is such a great resource, because sometimes the way you get started is, well, let me copy this repo, and if my thing is customers and credit cards, let me change the pets and the doctors to those things, and let me kind of rip out what I don't need and get to something that works for me, and then I can build from there. And I think another thing maybe we can do at some point is look at, I don't know if we call it a Zio accelerator or something, but you can kind of imagine if we now have this vision of this is what a best practice application looks like. Is there some tool where you in a structured way say hey, here's what my data model looks like, and we basically generate all this stuff based on that data model, and then you can kind of take it from there. That might be another really cool thing we could do.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, and it's worth looking at ecosystems like Ruby on Rails, which are incredibly successful and rely heavily on generation. And the problem with that is it generates, I like to say, you can go from 0 to whatever, blog in 15 minutes, and then 0 to, a unmaintainable legacy application in 30 minutes, which is a bummer. I mean, because people get so intoxicated by being able to build quickly, but then, what it generates for you is dynamic Ruby code, which I could never write again. I liked it at the time, but I would die now if I did. But if you can generate sort of composable, type-safe Scala code, I'm okay with that, I think, if it gets you 90% of the way there. I know we've talked a lot about in the past how, functional programmers tend to really be averse to things like code generators. But if it's generating functional compositional code that you would be writing manually, why not? I'm okay with making that compromise. I'm okay with sinning if that is the sin. I think that's definitely worth exploring. But cool. Any other thoughts or questions? I think we're good.
I think we're good so far.
Bill liked my point. Thank you, Bill. Sunglasses.
Yeah. We have some sunglasses. Yeah.
I do note sunglasses upon you.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, that's super exciting. Any thoughts, Olive? How does it feel?
It's just synthesis. Takeaways.
How are you?
I mean, overall, it was a really great experience. I think like being new to programming, whenever I started learning Scala, it was kind of like, trying to learn all of these basic concepts while also learning what I was repeatedly told is a very difficult language. I don't know if that put me in a certain, state of mind going into it, but I think that I was relying on, a lot of like pattern matching and just like repeating, like you said, with people copying like a repo and, maybe taking these practices into their own applications. I felt like I was kind of like on that path as well of just like, okay, well, I know how to do this and how to make this work, but do I understand like the logic behind all of these things? Writing this app really helped me, I think, understand like the path of information through a full stack application. And as I mentioned before as well, it really expanded my knowledge on all of the libraries within the Zio ecosystem. And, gave me a lot of experience with small things like version management, that seems to be something that people have to keep a keen eye on throughout the lifetime of their application. I think I've been working on this for a couple months and, I've had to update my versioning just a few times. So, which isn't a complaint. It's just like things that I wouldn't have experienced really otherwise if I weren't trying to make something that's going to live on.
Well, in particular, because you were using, like, you started with Zio2, like
Right.
RC5, and then it was the churniest, most internally breaking cross dependency time of Zio2's life cycle. So yeah, that was a fun added benefit, and of
Yeah.
course, learning Git and Git conflicts and all that
Yeah.
good stuff. But cool. So yeah, JavaScript versus Scala.
JavaScript versus.
One quick determination, please.
I think Scala is better. You
Oh,
heard my
okay.
argument at the beginning, right? Functional programming, the way to go.
Functional programming is super. You have convinced me. Very sound argument. Okay. Yeah. Well, unless there's any other last minute thoughts or questions, I don't know if Adam, you have any thoughts, but yeah, check out Zio Pet Clinic. Look at it. Ask questions. We're going to document more. I mean, there's tons of documents, but if anything is confusing to you, let us know. It's amazing having someone who is newer, a fresh set of eyes who could tell it to me straight about what makes sense or doesn't make sense. The curse of knowledge is real, and it's great to have someone who's not, that sounds insulting, who's not
dumb.
who's not cursed. I know. This is new and fresh, and that perspective is, my beginner's mind for Zio is gone. And I remember it being great as a beginner, but it's good to sort of keep getting new people in.
Sure.
And,
It happens quickly too. I had my first moment, I think, of like taking a certain amount of knowledge for granted. I had made a commit to this repo, and I think Adam, you had made a suggestion that perhaps referencing, side effecting code being housed in a certain place might assume a certain amount of knowledge on behalf of the person reading it. And I was like, oh yeah, I did do that.
You're now that person.
the curse starts slowly. All right. Well, yeah, thank you, everybody. I guess, can I share my screen real quick?
Sure.
Just to
Do we have another?
back around.
Take
Well,
it over.
I just, since we have so many lovely people here, if you like coming to Zio Symposium and all that stuff, let me share my screen. Building a website here called Scala.school. It is a full stack Scala application. And basically right now, hey, there's this little full stack Scala, full stack Zio, the Zio Pet Clinic app link, which has started 59 minutes ago. That's correct. So it's a nice clean hour. Our new time, we're getting more efficient. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And those basically new events will show up here when they're ready. So we're going to come up with a topic in the next couple of days, add it here. And then you can sign up for notifications. I think, let me know if any of you received the notification email. It looks like they went out. So sign up. Force me over the free tier of my SendGrid account, so I have to pay them to send emails. That would be cool. We also have a backlog of symposium videos that are sort of imported from YouTube. every day. So if any new ones show up, they'll get imported automatically. So I made something like this in the past, but like had to do it manually, and so it was out of date forever. But now it's not out of date. Look, you can make it big and small. Yeah, there's this like admin panel that's all generated with macros to manage this stuff. It looks really ugly because this is not user facing, but I am exploring some of those full stack optimizations and trying to force this through it. So yeah, give it a try. And if you want, you can even, hello there, request a new topic on how to eat a iced coffee. I don't know. You could do anything and you click that button and it'll take you to this repo and you can make a topic request. So far, only I've made topic requests and they're both facetious. So type some stuff in there. And Olive and I are also working on this thing called the Codex for whatever reason. And basically it has, for now, we're just exploring sort of the list methods. Once again, trying to like make some beginner-friendly documentation. A lot of these have simulations. So like for Dropwhile, you can visualize how that works. So you get some little animations for some of these.
Some of them have videos.
A couple of them have videos. I will be recording other videos and I'm going to be basically extending this with, yeah, so look at partition, expanding this with Zio content on little topics as well. So just trying to make these like composable pieces of knowledge that break down and like they cross-link to one another. So if you like, we reference a term like, for instance, prefix returns the prefix of the original list, you can hover over that and it'll take you to another card, which will hopefully explain that concept. So hopefully we can like sort of build this tree of knowledge and people can from any level sort of keep digging into concepts that they don't understand. Yeah, so just go to Scala School and check that out. I'll be probably, yeah, adding more to it in the future. Hopefully that's useful. I'll post a link. Other than that, any final words?
Thank you for allowing me to come and present my app.
Yes.
Thank you for doing it. A fantastic job.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your help and Adam for approving all of my many pull requests.
Very easy and they're such high quality.
Thank you.
All right. Good job, Olive.
Yay.
And, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Talk to you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.